So today we have a Bryan Caplan. He is a professor of economics, the New York Times bestseller author of The Myth of the Rational Voter, Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids, The Case Against Education, Open Borders, Labor Icon versus the World. Hello.
Hello.
The first question is about AI. We talked a lot about AI in this conference. Should we be excited or should we be worried or both when it comes to the future of AI and how this will influence future families? Because there's also a correlation that we might see already.
I would say 90% excited, 10% worried. Mostly I'm just worried about human beings doing bad things with it. I do have friends who are big science fiction fans who think that the AI is going to become self-aware and kill us all like in the Terminator movies. I think they're pretty crazy. The main thing is this is like all the other technologies that we have where most of the time people use it to make human life better. And the reason why life is so much better is because that's the way technology almost always gets used. Although there is this terrible downside risk of human beings using it to do something terrible.
Yeah, especially it's hard for parents because there are many concerns when it comes to raising kids with technology and AI. So
I mean, I wouldn't think of it as something that's hard for parents. I mean, again, you might have other complaints about the internet generally. I don't see that AI is going to be especially bad. In fact, you might think it will give your kid better advice than TikTok anyway. Depending upon what you ask the AI to actually do. If it could actually go and finally make robots work well, or self-driving cars work well, if the AI could be combined to go and take care of these parental chores, then it would be a huge benefit for parents.
you also created a book, Don't Be a Feminist. What is a feminist?
Yeah, great question. If you just go to a dictionary, it says a feminist is someone who thinks that men and women should be treated equally, which I think is a totally great idea. But it doesn't seem to actually describe the way we use the word. In particular, in the United States, there are a couple of surveys where they ask people, first of all, are you a feminist or not? Second of all, do you think men and women should be treated equally? And almost everyone, even if they say they're not a feminist, agrees, which means it's a terrible definition. It's basically like calling your newspaper Pravda, right? It's not, and then say, oh, are you against Pravda? You're against truth, right? It's a way of using definitions to bully people into pretending to agree with you. So again, what I say, a reasonable definition of feminism, and again, it's not one I make up, it's one that describes how people actually use the word. Say a reasonable definition of feminism is it's the view that our society generally treats men more fairly than women, which then brings us to the question of, is that true? Obviously, it's easy to find some ways that our society treats men more fairly than women. But if you are then looking for other cases, you can say, oh, there's also ways that our society treats women more fairly than men. A lot of what I do in the essay is just try to go through all the evidence for a lot of different issues. And I come away saying, I just don't think that it's true that on balance, our society treats men more fairly than women. And that's the top reason I say don't be a feminist, because feminism is just false. Although that essay was addressed to my daughter, Valley, she's too young. But I said also, I think besides being wrong, feminism also tends to promote two very negative attitudes. One is antipathy, right? That means just being angry at other people, which, see, is not constructive even if you have a good reason to be angry. But if you don't have a good reason to be angry, being angry is crazy. It is just very bad for you to be angry at people and for no good reason. And I say it also just promotes self-pity, just feeling sorry for yourself. And again, it's one thing to say you've had a terrible life, feel sorry for yourself, but even that you wouldn't say. If there was someone stuck in a wheelchair, would you go and tell them, do you know what you should do? Feel sorry for yourself all the time. So you wouldn't say it even for a person who had the worst possible problem for no fault of their own. But if you are just wrong about being treated badly, then it's just ridiculous to feel self-pity. And so these are two emotions I really try to encourage my daughter to not feel. And I would just say these are destructive emotions for anyone to feel. I've had people say it's just not true that feminism is promoting antipathy and self-pity. I think it is, and don't.
On the panel, we talked about many problems in today's society, and one of them was that younger women have a hard time finding husbands, finding men that are ambitious, that are equally emotionally intelligent, that are equally also intellectually on the same level, So what is your opinion on that?
So
what would you say to
yes,
younger women?
yes.
Because it is a problem that is vivid not only in Europe but also in States. Many podcasts has been talked about, and that more and more women, they don't want to have children, but There are reasons for that.
Right. So I would say a few things. So one is I think it is well known that women often have impossibly high standards. And if someone, like if you just say I'll only marry the billionaire prince of a country, then you'll probably never get married. And so if your standards are just crazy high, I would encourage people to say maybe my standards are too high and I should be more open-minded and more forgiving of other human beings and say, guess what? I'm not perfect either. So that's the first thing I would say. But something that, in addition, I would say, look, it's one thing to have high standards for things that are really important, but it's something else to have high standards for everything. So I would encourage people to figure out their top priorities and focus on those and then be flexible on everything else. So like one of my big pieces of advice to young people is you put way too much emphasis on looks, especially men put too much emphasis on looks. And when young men said, I can't find a girlfriend, I always say, well, like, what about her? It's like, oh, I couldn't possibly, so there's nothing wrong with her. So, if you really want to have especially a happy long-term relationship, personality is the most important thing by far. Looks don't last anyway. So it just makes a lot of sense to turn down the dial. Look, I understand we're human beings and looks matter to us, but if you make it the number one most important thing, it's going to be hard. So just try to find what is really an important priority for you and focus on that instead of saying everything has to be perfect, which unless you are perfect, you cannot expect that to work.
Yes, I love how you mentioned creating. I love how you mentioned creating a list. This is so crucial.
Yes.
Another question that I have is, what do you mean by saying women's tears have too much power in the book?
Sorry, women.
Women's tears.
Women's sears?
Tears, like tears.
Oh, women's tears.
Yeah, they
women's
have too much-
tears.
They have too much power.
So this is actually a concept from my friend Richard Hanenia. And again, this is something that I assume resonates in Poland too, definitely in the United States. It is very hard for men to see women crying and then not try to go and do something to make them feel better. His complaint is there are areas of life that were traditionally, it was just considered to be very wrong to cry. And that's changed. So, for example, it used to be that in a university classroom, this is one where you're supposed to put emotions aside and just focus on the facts. And over time, American universities have changed where there's just a lot more focus on don't offend others. And what my friend Richard pointed out is that if you actually pay attention to people that are being offended, women are overrepresented. Women are more likely to say, I find that very offensive. And a lot of human intellectual progress comes from saying things that are offensive because sometimes offensive things are just true. You just think about the theory of evolution and how many people it offended. It was still true.
Is the non-woke market underserved?
Is the non-woke market underserved?
Yes.
I'm not sure, but I tend to think so. I mean, the main thing that makes me wonder is it does seem like people that are woke care more and are more likely to actually not buy a product because it's not woke, whereas people that are not woke are less likely to care. So it may be that business is actually already optimizing, but still, it just seems like there's too little diversity in the range of products. Normally, if you go to the grocery store and look at all the kinds of candy, there's 1,000 kinds of candy, right? And yet, when you look at the political ties of different products, it seems like products are either apolitical or they are woke, right? And it does seem like that's just too narrow of a range. I think the best explanation for this in the United States is that if a company is very vocally anti-woke, it makes it easier to sue them, right? So, like in the United States, officially we have free speech. However, the government has basically delegated censorship to lawsuits where if someone feels like your speech is offensive on the job, then they can sue the company. So it really is still like government censorship, except the government goes and says, oh, we're not censoring. It's just the people that have a legal right to sue you that are doing it, and you can say whatever you want. It's just that you will have your business destroyed. So when people talk about the free speech of the United States, I would say that on the job free speech is actually very low because of the discrimination laws that we have, right? And again, it's basically 100% for censorship of things that are not woke.
Oh, why society is becoming ill? Like more females, more males are becoming mentally ill. This is a huge problem that is becoming more and more relevant in European societies, but also in US.
So part of this is just medical language. So in the medieval era, no one said they were mentally ill. They might say they were possessed by demons. We would look and say it's kind of the same thing. So it's important to understand that when people think that the right way to describe a problem is using medical language, then you will see a large rise in the people that are medically sick. But it does not mean that there is a huge rise in the problem. So for example, like in the past, if someone was felt very sad, they might talk to a priest. Now they talk to a doctor, but the priest wouldn't have said you were sick. They would say you have a problem with your soul. So that's the first thing to remember. Now the question for me is just, is this all just a redefining of problems and using new words, or is there actually a change in what's going on with how people really feel inside? I mean, one thing that people study, which to get a handle on this, is suicide rates. So I don't know about what suicide looks like in Poland. In the United States, suicide has risen a lot. But here's the thing: if you go and look back in time, it was really low, like in the 80s and 90s, and then it was higher in the 1950s. So anytime you're trying to explain what's going on, you've got to say, well, how is today like the 1950s, but different from the 80s and 90s? And I just say that that's pretty confusing. I mean, I'd say the main thing that I do believe that is a real difference between the past is this rising loneliness. Yes. So a lot more people just say that they are lonely. I mean, I think COVID went and ramped that up to a great degree, because suddenly wanting to avoid loneliness became a crime. It's like, I want to be around other people. You horrible monster. You want to be around other human beings, but that's terrible. That's the worst thing anyone could do. Loneliness, I think, was up before. But my friend Arthur Brooks had a piece on how even after COVID, many people are not socializing again. And when he talked to people, I think surveys also, he said, well, we just got out of the habit, right? Which is weird. It's like, well, if people like it, why would they get out of the habit? I mean, and I would say that socializing is a lot like making new friends generally, which is that if you are alone, you don't have friends, you feel sad. But in order to solve your problem, you have to get even sadder for a little while. Like, so if you have no friends, it hurts to go and try to make new friends. It's kind of embarrassing and humiliating, and you feel like a loser.
It's even more, the problem is with it even more now, just because there are so many remote workers.
Yes.
So we're just closing each other in just like house, and it's just hard to get out.
Yeah, but what I always tell to people, look, if you're lonely, I know this doesn't feel good, but the only way out is you have to actually be more outgoing and be friendlier to people. And just reach out to people. I know a lot of people just say, "Oh, social media is bad." I have made so many real life friends for social media. I mean, I think it's don't blame the technology, blame the human. The human is using it. Yeah, it's how you use it. It's not the technology itself. You can use social media to make friends. So I've been traveling through Europe for about half a month right now. Almost every city I go, I meet friends. So on social media, I say, I'm going to be here. Anyone want to meet up? And almost everywhere I go, I meet new people. Right. So, to me, this has been great. When I was a kid, I hardly had any friends. When I was very shy. You can use social media to make enormous numbers of friends, but you just have to try. And most importantly, you must be the initiator. Never, if all you do is wait around for other people to do stuff for you, you will be alone. You'll be bored. Just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So when people say, be agentic. Agentic. Do you have this word in Polish? Agent, it's like, be like an agent. Don't be like someone where things happen to you. Be someone who does things to the world.
Yeah, perfect. There is more and more younger people that are not consider having children, mainly due to financial reasons. If you had to come up with one pro-life slogans for younger generation, what would that be?
I would say, first of all, it can't be true that it's financial fundamentally, because people used to be much poorer and they had much larger families. So it doesn't make sense to say, oh, it's financial directly. It's got to be something else that's going on. So again, part of it is just that there's so many entertaining things that you could do with money now. So I think that is a reason. It used to just be so boring to not have kids that people would have kids like, well, what else are we going to do? And now there are just so many fun things you could be doing instead. But in terms of what I would say in favor of having kids, so everything that you can say against loneliness is also a reason to be against childlessness, right? So having kids is a way of having people that are around, that are there for you, though that, it is a strong bond. I mean, when I just think about what would I have done during COVID without my kids, I was very lonely even with 4 kids. But without those 4 kids, I don't know what I would have done. It would have just been terrible for me. I mean, I think probably the main thing I would say is if you look at parents and see that they are not having fun with their kids, don't blame parenting, blame the parents. Don't be like them. Like, you know, a child is a chance to have a wonderful relationship with a person that is much funner than most adults. Most kids are much more fun than most adults. Honestly, if I could either just talk with a random 5-year-old or a random 50-year-old, I would much rather talk with a random 5-year-old. They're much more entertaining. They're much more open-minded. They're more curious. So if you look at a child as this person that you could have a lot of fun with, rather than someone that you just have to be the disciplinarian for, I think that kids just become, you know, very appealing. I mean, look, I will say honestly, like, you know, I like a lot of what I do is encourage people to have kids, but I also realize I'm an unusual person. I'm different from other people. I just love kids. I love babies. To me, they're just like so much fun. I will say, look, there's some people like, all I want to do is go to wine and cheese parties. Yeah. Like, all right, well, that's the only thing you like in the world, then don't have kids because you're not the right kind of person to do that. Or maybe after 10 years of wine and cheese parties, you'll change your mind. Yeah. But on the other hand, if you're someone that likes laughing, someone that likes curiosity, someone that likes explaining the hypocrisy of our society to a person who doesn't understand what's going on yet, then have kids because they're the perfect people for those things.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about solutions now. What are the solutions when it comes to, for example, for younger people that want to move out from their parents, but they don't make enough money? They want to create family, but again, they don't have enough money. What would you think the solution would be?
There's so many solutions. I mean, here's the first one, of course. It's not pleasant, but everyone knows it. Like, if you don't have enough money, then reduce your consumption of things that you don't especially care about and save money. Right? Now, if you're living with your parents, then saving money is not so hard. Again, this is advice that, on the one hand, it's obviously true. On the other hand, people don't like it. A few years ago in the United States, there was a big controversy because someone pointed out that if you simply bought one less Starbucks coffee per day, starting at the age of 20, you would have $1 million extra in retirement. And a bunch of people got really angry. So, that is not the reason. Like, look, it's math. The math is true. So don't get, like the person was correct. How can you get mad about this? But this is just general advice. Look, it's not saying don't enjoy life at all, but it is saying, you know, think about what you actually enjoy. I find a lot of people spend money just out of inertia, out of habit, and if they really think about it, they just don't enjoy it very much. So I always tell people like that, like, if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. So that's one thing. Another thing, of course, is, like I was talking about being open-minded about your spouse. All right. Well, this is easier for women than for men. So if you're open-minded about the age of a possible husband and you're willing to go and marry someone 10 years older, then he's likely to be making a lot more money. And then you can do something that you say is not possible. Again, if you just say, no, I can't possibly be with someone 10 years older. So there's other ideas. So, like, in the Bay Area of the United States, this is around the heart of the tech sector. The stereotype is that women in San Francisco don't want to marry guys who work in programming, and they consider them, they're nerds, they're no good, they're not attractive.
No emotional intelligence.
Yes. And let's say, look, could it not be that some of them are okay? Like, I've heard that they'll just say, I would never date anyone from there. It's like, that's just so close-minded. At least give them a chance. Maybe it's going to be a nerd who's also a really nice guy and a good father. I mean, honestly, if you do want to have kids, I would say a lot of what you should be focusing on is, would this person be a good parent? And does this person have the kind of personality traits that I want my kids to have? So rather than someone who drives a really cool car, well, once you have kids, you don't want the cool car anyway. So, focusing more on what is my long-run plan? So that's something else I would say.
And the last question, really, really short, but I really wanted to ask it just because you wrote a lot of book about parenting. What are the pros of having kids?
What are the pluses of having kids?
Yeah, what are the pluses? Yeah. Yes, because there's many books that talk about cons, or people. Yes. Let's talk about it.
The pluses, I would say, you get to have a little friend, right? And it's not considered weird. Normally, if you're an adult and you have a child for a friend, it's really weird. In America, we have a holiday called Halloween where you wear costumes and ask for candy. And like, it's my favorite holiday, but until I had, like, I loved it when I was a kid, and then I grew up and I couldn't do it. Then I have kids, and now I can dress up and wear a costume again. And I like it.
Excuse to be weird.
Yeah, yes, and yes. So it's not weird. It's like, what a wonderful father. He's pretending to like Halloween. Like, I'm not pretending. I love this. But like all the activities that you enjoy doing with kids that you can do with them, just having a little buddy to take with you. These are the kinds of things that I would focus on of the positives. A lot of what I do in my book actually is just to say that the negatives are overstated. I say, look, we all understand the positives of having your little buddy and getting to see and getting to really re-experience life again and through the eyes of another person. But it's the negatives that really weigh on people of, it's just going to be so hard and I'm going to lose sleep for 5 years. What I talk about in that book is how so much of this pain is self-imposed. It is not required to be a good parent. The long-run effects of doing things the easy way on kids appear to be basically zero. You're not hurting your kids by doing it the easy way. Just one example, but it's an important example for new parents. We know how to make kids sleep through the night from an early age. Like, really, all you need to do is just when the kid cries, don't pick him up. And within a few days, kids will sleep through the night. You have to wait a few months. You can't do it for a newborn, but within 3 months, your kid will sleep through the night with like 90% chance if you do this. I know a lot of parents who just feel so bad about doing this that they lose sleep for years, right? And some of it at least is, well, like, think about what kind of a person the child will grow up in if he doesn't feel loved by being picked up when he's a baby. And the answer is the evidence is that will have no effect on that. So just give yourself a break and get some sleep like a human being. So, that's just one example, but in my book, I go over a lot of examples like this of self-inflicted parental suffering, which you can get rid of guilt-free because it will not hurt your child.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this interview.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great fun.